Before there was a world to save, there was a studio that dared to dream beyond what anyone thought possible. In the early 1990s, a small team in Irvine, California, called Silicon and Synapse, was building games most people would never remember. Rock and Roll Racing, The Lost Vikings. Good games, but not legends. Then came Warcraft, Orcs and Humans. A real-time strategy game that put two civilizations at each other's throats, and it changed everything. Warcraft 2 followed, and then the masterpiece, Warcraft 3. A game so beloved, so deeply crafted, that its modding community would accidentally invent entirely new genres. But Blizzard wanted more. They looked at the virtual worlds being built by games like EverQuest and Ultima Online, clunky, punishing, beautiful experiments in what online worlds could be, and they asked a question that would reshape the entire industry. What if we built a world that millions of people could live in together? It was an absurd gamble. MMOs were niche, they were complicated, they were expensive to build and expensive to maintain. Blizzard was risking everything, their reputation, their finances, their future, on a genre that most publishers considered a dead end. But they didn't just want to make an MMO, they wanted to make the MMO the one that would make the entire world pay attention. And that is exactly what they did. November 23rd, 2004. Across the world, hundreds of thousands of people loaded a disk into their computers, created a character, and stepped into Azeroth for the very first time. And nothing could have prepared them for what they found. You chose your race, your class, you picked a name, and then the camera pulled back, and there it was. A world, not a level, not a map. A living, breathing world stretching out in every direction, filled with other real people all discovering it at the same time you were. The servers crashed almost immediately. Queues stretched into the thousands. People waited for hours just to log in. And they didn't care. They waited because they knew, even in those first chaotic hours, that something extraordinary was happening. A night elf waking up in the purple glow of Teldrassil. A human stepping out of Northshire Abbey into golden sunlight. A Tauren standing on the red plains of Mulgore, watching a thunderstorm roll across the horizon. These weren't just starting zones. They were the first pages of stories that would last years, decades even. World of Warcraft didn't just launch a game, it launched a second life for millions of people. A place where you weren't who the real world said you were. You were a hero, an adventurer, a warrior walking into the unknown, and the world was waiting for you. There is a secret at the heart of World of Warcraft, a truth that took years for even Blizzard to fully understand. The game was never really about the quests, it was never about the loot, it was about the people. From its very first days, WoW was a social engine disguised as a fantasy game. You couldn't solo the hard content, you needed a group, you needed a guild, you needed to trust strangers with your time, your progress, your reputation, and they needed to trust you. Guilds became families, not metaphorically, actually. People spent more time with their guildmates than with their co-workers. They knew each other's real names, their struggles, their jokes. They showed up for raid night the way you'd show up for a friend's birthday. Because it mattered. Because people were counting on you. Friendships were forged in those dungeons. Real friendships. People fell in love running through Stranglethorn Vale. People grieved together when a guildmate passed away in real life. And the community held in-game funerals that made headlines around the world. World of Warcraft didn't just create a game world, it created a social fabric. A place where lonely teenagers found their people, where veterans found purpose, where parents and children played side by side as equals. No algorithm designed this, no focus group predicted it. It happened because Blizzard built a world worth sharing. and millions of people chose to share it. You are not prepared. 4 words, that's all it took. Illidan's Storm Rage snarled them from every television screen, every banner ad, every loading screen, and the world believed him. Nobody was prepared for what the Burning Crusade would become. January 2007. The dark portal opened and players poured through into Outland, a shattered world floating in the void of space. It was alien. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. Nagran's floating islands against an amber sky, Zangar Marsh's bioluminescent mushroom forests, Netherstorm's arcane shattered landscape crackling with purple lightning. This wasn't Azeroth anymore, this was something else entirely. The Burning Crusade didn't just add content, it reinvented what WoW could be. Flying mounts changed how you experienced the world. Suddenly you weren't walking through it, you were soaring above it. Arenas brought structured competitive PvP, birthing an entire esports scene. And the raids, Karajan, Black Temple, Sunwell Plateau, pushed the boundaries of what coordinated group gameplay could achieve. But most importantly, TBC proved that WoW wasn't a flash in the pan. It proved that this world could grow, that it could evolve, that each new chapter could make you fall in love all over again. The subscriber count climbed past 8 million, then 9, then 10. Something unstoppable was building, and the greatest chapter was still to come. My son, the day you were born, the very forests of Lordaeron whispered the name Arthas. No villain in gaming history has ever been introduced with more weight, more tragedy, more inevitability than the Lich King. And when Blizzard announced that Wrath of the Lich King would take players to Northrend to face him, the entire gaming world held its breath. November 2008, Wrath launched, and what followed was the golden age of World of Warcraft. 12 million subscribers, 12 million people all sharing one world. No game before had achieved this, no game since has come close. Northrend was a masterpiece of world design, the haunted forests of Grizzly Hills, the frozen wastes of Icecrown where the Lich King's citadel loomed over everything like a monument to death itself. Storm Peaks, where ancient titans had carved their legacy into the mountains. And the raids, Ulduar, which many still consider the greatest raid ever designed. A sprawling titan facility where every boss told a story, where hard modes were discovered, not selected from a menu. It was elegant, it was challenging, it was art, but it was Icecrown's citadel that defined the expansion. Ascending that frozen spire, fighting through Arthas' most loyal servants until finally, you stood before him. The Lich King, the fallen prince, and you fought him. And it meant something. This was the peak, the absolute peak. And everyone who was there knew it, even then. "40 people, one room, one boss, one chance." This was the original promise of raiding in World of Warcraft, and nothing in gaming, nothing has ever replicated what it felt like. Molten Core, 1999. No, 2004. 40 players descend into the volcanic depths beneath Blackrock Mountain. Most of them have no idea what they're doing. The strategies don't exist yet. The guides haven't been written. You're figuring it out together in real time, wiping over and over until suddenly, everything clicks. Ragnaros rises from the lava. "By fire be purged!" The screen shakes. People are screaming on Ventrilo. Half the raid is dead. And somehow you win. That feeling, that exact feeling. It's why people played this game for 20 years. Raiding evolved into something extraordinary. From the gothic horror of Nexramas to the mechanical precision of Mythic Blackhand. From the puzzle box elegance of Ulduar to the cinematic spectacle of Hellfire Citadel. Each tier pushed the boundaries of what coordinated multiplayer gameplay could achieve. The world-first race became an esport before esports existed. Guilds like Nihilum, Insidia, Method, and Liquid spent weeks progressing through encounters designed to be nearly impossible. Millions watched. Careers were built on it. But at its core, raiding was never about the loot. It was about the moment when 25 people all did the right thing at the right time, and a boss that had seemed impossible finally fell. That was magic. Pure, unrepeatable magic. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. The Golden Age didn't end with a crash. It ended with a slow, quiet erosion that took years to fully understand. Cataclysm launched in December 2010, and it literally shattered the old world. Every zone you'd leveled through was transformed. It was ambitious, it was dramatic, and it left millions of players feeling like their home had been demolished without their permission. The subscriber numbers started to fall, slowly at first, then faster. Mists of Pandaria was better than people expected. Thoughtful, beautiful, deeply crafted. But the damage was done. The narrative had shifted. World of Warcraft was no longer the thing everyone was playing. It was the thing people used to play. And then came Warlords of Draenor, and the bleeding became a hemorrhage. WoD launched with incredible promise. Time travel, reimagined Draenor, the best leveling experience Blizzard had ever created. But then, nothing. Content dried up. Patch cycles stretched into months of silence. Garrisons, the expansion's tentpole feature, trapped players alone in instance bases instead of pushing them into the world. Players left in droves. The subscriber count dropped below 6 million for the first time since launch year. Blizzard stopped publicly reporting numbers. A silence that spoke louder than any earnings call. Something precious was slipping away. And the people who loved this game the most were beginning to wonder. Was the magic gone forever? Leeroy Jenkins. One word, one name, screamed into a microphone during a doomed charge into a room full of dragon whelps, and it became one of the most recognized moments in internet history. That's the power of World of Warcraft. It didn't just live inside computers, it escaped into the real world. South Park devoted an entire episode to it. Make love, not Warcraft. And it wasn't mocking the game, it was celebrating it. Because by then, WoW wasn't a niche hobby, it was a cultural force. Toyota ran WoW-themed commercials. Mr. T had a night elf mohawk. The game appeared in movies, TV shows, congressional hearings. It was the punchline and the headline. It was everywhere. And beneath the memes and the pop culture moments, something darker and more complex was happening. Gold farming became a genuine industry. Workers in China grinding virtual currency for real-world wages. The ethics were troubling. The economics were fascinating. Addiction became a real conversation. Parents pulled their children from the game. Spouses issued ultimatums. People lost jobs, failed classes, ruined relationships. All chasing one more level, one more piece of gear, one more raid night. World of Warcraft forced the world to reckon with something it had never dealt with before. A virtual world so compelling, so addictive, so deeply satisfying that millions of people chose it over reality. That's not a failure of those people. That's a testament to the staggering power of what Blizzard built. Legion gave everyone hope. In 2016, Blizzard delivered an expansion that felt like a return to form. Dramatic stakes, compelling systems, beloved characters returning and dying in ways that mattered. The artifact weapon system gave every class a legendary story. The Broken Shore felt like the stakes were real again, but what came next nearly broke everything. Battle for Azeroth launched in 2018, and the backlash was immediate and devastating. Azerite armor felt like a downgrade from artifacts. Island expeditions were repetitive, war fronts were unlosable. The faction war storyline that was supposed to define the expansion felt hollow and contrived. And then the real world caught up to World of Warcraft in the worst possible way. In 2021, a devastating lawsuit from the state of California exposed widespread harassment and discrimination within Activision Blizzard. The revelation shook the gaming industry to its core. Employees staged walkouts, players cancelled subscriptions. The community that had built its identity around this game was forced to reconcile their love for Azeroth with the reality of the company that built it. Shadowlands, which launched during the pandemic, became the expansion nobody could defend. Borrowed power systems, time-gated content. A story that took beloved characters to a cosmic afterlife and somehow made it boring. The player base was wounded, not just by the game's quality, but by the broken trust between the people who played it and the people who made it. World of Warcraft had survived bad expansions before. Could it survive this? You think you do, but you don't. In 2013 at BlizzCon, a player stood up and asked a simple question. Would Blizzard ever bring back classic vanilla World of Warcraft? The answer from the stage, delivered with a smile, became one of the most infamous quotes in gaming history. You think you do, but you don't. But they did. They absolutely did. For years, private servers had kept the dream of vanilla WoW alive. Nostalrius, a fan-run server with hundreds of thousands of players, became so popular that Blizzard shut it down. And the outcry was deafening. Petitions gathered millions of signatures. The gaming press rallied. Even Hollywood joined in, with directors publicly lobbying for official Classic servers. Blizzard finally relented. WoW Classic launched in August 2019, and the result was nothing short of extraordinary. Queues stretched for hours. Servers were packed. Thousands of players crammed into starting zones, fighting over the same quest mobs, helping each other, forming groups the way they used to. Not through automated matchmaking, but by typing in chat, by talking, by being human. And people wept. They actually wept. Not because the graphics were better or the systems were deep, but because it felt like coming home. It felt like 2004 again, like the world was new, like anything was possible, like adventure was waiting behind every hill. WoW Classic proved something profound, that the magic was never in the code. It was in the community, and the community had never left. Nobody expected an expansion about dragons to save World of Warcraft, but Dragonflight did something no expansion had done in a decade. It made people believe again. Launched in November 2022, Dragonflight stripped away the bloated systems that had plagued the game for years. No borrowed power, no cosmic stakes, no convoluted storylines about death dimensions. Instead, a beautiful new continent. Dynamic flight that completely reinvented traversal. Professions that actually mattered. And a story that was, for once, simply about the world of Azeroth and the people who lived in it. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't dramatic, it was humble, and that humility was exactly what the game needed. Then Microsoft completed its acquisition of Activision Blizzard for nearly $69 billion, the largest gaming deal in history. Suddenly, WoW was part of the Xbox ecosystem. Game Pass subscribers could play for free. The barriers to entry crumbled, and then came The War Within, the first chapter of a new trilogy called the World Soul Saga. Underground zones that took the art team's skills to astonishing new heights. Delves for solo players. Hero talents that added meaningful choice without system bloat. Reviews were the strongest in over a decade. Player counts surged. The mood in the community shifted from skepticism to something that felt almost dangerous: optimism. World of Warcraft, against all odds, against all predictions, against 20 years of entropy, was ascending again. The phoenix was rising from its own ashes. "20 years. 20 years since a dwarf with a gun stood in the snow of Dunmora, and the camera pulled back to reveal a world. 20 years since people logged in and forgot for a few hours that the real world existed. 20 years since millions of strangers became friends, then family, then legend. No game in history has done what World of Warcraft did. Not in scale, not in duration, not in the depth of its impact on the people who played it. It shaped careers. People became game designers because of WoW. They became programmers, artists, writers, community managers, all because a game showed them what was possible when you built a world with love and let people live in it. It shaped lives. People met their spouses in WoW. They named their children after WoW characters. They held memorials for friends they only ever knew through a screen. And those memorials were as real and as meaningful as anything held in a church. The game was never perfect. No 20-year-old anything is perfect. There were bad expansions, broken promises, corporate scandals, and years where it felt like the soul of the game had been lost forever. But here's the thing. It's still here. 20 years later, and people are still logging in, still forming guilds, still running into Molten Core for the 1000th time, just because it feels like home. World of Warcraft didn't just change gaming, it changed what we believed games could be. A second home, a shared dream, a world that belonged to everyone who ever stepped into it. And somewhere in Azeroth tonight, a new player is creating their first character, choosing their race, their class, picking a name, and the camera pulls back and the world opens up before them. That feeling, after 20 years, it hasn't changed. Welcome to World of Warcraft.